Is this a hidden gem? Is this something that I or we have been sleeping on? Because what are we building today? Let's take a look. We've got ourselves an MST CFX-W. It's got the 313 wheelbase. It's got all kinds of crazy and fancy parts. It's got less of a name and more just a collection of letters.
All names and letters, dickhead.
I mean, that's absolutely fair. But moving on to the Unbox. Credit to MST, the packaging is nice. It's up there with Traxxas or Associated, any of those. The tires have a decidedly canyon trail feel to them in terms of how firm the rubber is. They don't look bad. Definitely better than a grabber. The foams, on the other hand, are too soft. I can tell already, no matter what this truck ends up weighing, these foams are not hard enough. The body is a thoroughly unlicensed, obvious Jeep. The JP1, I believe MST calls it. The frame rails, worth noting, are just fully symmetrical. There is no left or right or front or back, which is, I kind of like that. Here we got the body coming out. It's nice. The molding is consistent. It's got good details. It doesn't have thin patches. It's better than what you'd get out of a typical Pro line offering. The included wheels they reminded me a lot of sedan wheels. Glue-ons, they will not be employed. The body comes with a full set of ABS details, and the packaging is really good. I was surprised at how thorough, like every bag for every stage is not just individually packaged, but like individually shrink sealed together. All the screws are in their own little compartment, washers are in their own little compartments. You're not going to lose anything as long as you follow along in the manual and go bag by bag. Something like 15 bags total, and a solitary complaint is when manufacturers seek to save a few pennies and they make changes to a model throughout its life, they won't update the manual. They will just make addendums to this manual and throw them in as little spare sheets that float around in there. And the MST CFX-W has that. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that the cost of the components has to outweigh the cost of reprinting a manual, because some of the parts, just looking through during the unboxing, some of the parts don't line up with the pictures of the parts on the box. So you know some changes have been made. I think it first came out sometime around 2017. So it's by today's standards, this is a somewhat older model. But I wanted to try another portal truck, as I think I'm a portal guy, particularly in the terrain that I'm driving on. I'm just trying to get the bags situated here, assuming that we're going to start in some sort of numerical order. And that brings us to the gear. I bought this as a kit because it mentioned a couple upgrades, and I just don't have the room for more RTR electronics. So Copperhead 10 from Castle with a 1900 kV censored motor will be doing the powertrain duties. My traditional favorite, what I call a cheap servo, the AGFRC A73CHLW, another collection of letters. And for radio, can't go wrong, FlySky GT5. Cracking into the manual package here next. We've got a couple different selections of decals. They give you a set if you're gonna Traxxify the body and just do a full paint and put the gray window decals on, but I'm not all about that. If I get a clear body, I got a clear body for a reason. I fight with some cellophane for a while. The decals are pretty nice. All but one sheet are pre-cut. Those sheets are both pre-cut. It's got the extremely thin masking tape style window masks, which are not my favorite. I much prefer the Oracal style. Here we have the supplemental sheets and the instructions for the body. One of those supplemental instruction sheets, I believe that when I leafed there, I only saw 2. And it turns out there's 3, and that will come back on me later in this video. The manual is a nice layout. They are all the pictures are to scale, so I tend to just reach for calipers usually, but you can just test your nuts and bolts up against the pictures. So you know what that means. It means it's time-lapse time. The time-lapse. Starting with the gearbox, which is a thing I didn't even know existed, the planetary gearbox, aka the deceleration gear assembly, which seems like an unnecessarily complicated way to build a transmission, but I'm not a mechanical engineer, so maybe more teeth touching more teeth is more better. That's all I can figure. This is not something unique to MST. I've seen this from other manufacturers. It's what I like to call too many steps for one page. It's basically assembling the entire chassis all in one step. And it can't be just me that the sheer amount of arrows pointing at holes in a chassis rail, of which there has to be 24 holes on each side, and you're just supposed to manage to get all of the holes to line up with every other hole. I don't know how I feel about aluminum links. I know aluminum compared to other materials is a little more draggy, and anodization doesn't stand up well to being dragged over rocks. But I do have aluminum links on a couple of other builds, and they're not awful. The shocks are nice. The tolerances seem pretty good. It's mostly standard stuff. I didn't notice until I was mostly done with them that the caps didn't match the caps in the picture, because it's in one of the addendum sheets. There it is. It just slid into place. They went together well. The kit comes with 10 weight oil, and the shocks are dual spring variety. I don't know if that's going to be good or a gimmick, but they are some little baby things. I think about 70 millimeters long, and even with that micro bottle of oil, as you can see, it's sitting there in the tool bin. It took about 10% of what was in that bottle to fill those shocks. The CVDs are nice. They are on The same I think the same addendum sheet with the shocks. They'd changed from a set screw retainer to a snap ring. It's fine. They're fine. And then I get to the portals, more deceleration gear assemblies, and I'd never seen a planetary 4-gear portal. And there's the 2 different sizes of gears that are in there. There's actually 3 of the 14 tooth and 1 of the 16 tooth. See, only the lower one is that 16 tooth. And putting that together, yeah, I snapped ring a couple of them wrong. I'm not even surprised. But it's full bearings everywhere. We've got 4 gears in each planetary. I think the transmission has like 7 gears inside of it, plus the transfer case. This truck has more gears in it than a 2-speed TRX-4 by a couple gears. Here, bolting up the axles, which are nice. It's fully symmetrical. The front and rear axle are the exact same assembly because the truck is 4-link front and rear with axle mounted steering. It's just, the more I read in the descriptions of it, I was like, oh, I like axle mounted steering and I like portals, and it does look a little cartoonishly high already. We'll see if that proves to be an issue. The showdowns have been bounced around a lot, and they continue to get bounced around. I'm using them here as the mock-up tires, potentially lifetime tires, to get the chassis up off the ground, which reminded me, yeah, I forgot to build the wheels because I knew I wasn't going to use them, but the tires seemed okay, so I press into duty those axial Capra stock wheels because they're a particularly easy to mount set of plastic bead locks. I've never had an issue with any tire just flying on them, and this was no exception. That brings us to what I call the aftermath, the price of every individual thing being packaged individually. This has to be more plastic than I've had left over after building a kit, at least in recent memory, if not ever. Anyhow, let's get to fitting that. It's not a Jeep, but it's a Jeep body. As I mentioned, the thickness of the plastic is nice. It's consistent throughout. The cut lines were clear and easy to see. And the kit comes with body mounts, obviously clearly intended to mount whatever you want. You could get a van on there. So everything had to get cut. And I would later find that one on the addendum sheets, it showed how short to cut the posts, but I just kept cutting them until I got it to where I wanted. And I gotta say, it sits great. Now this was just an unintended consequence. I didn't intend to custom mount all the electronics, but when I tried to put the copperhead in the back, the stock location is between the shock towers, there was no way. None of the cables were going to reach. So I decided to just lengthen one set, the battery lead, and then I could get everything nice and tucked tight right in there, right behind the front bumper, right behind the grill. So I figured I don't need all the other stuff. It had a nice aluminum battery tray. I would just take a couple scrap pieces of Kydex, put a little bend, single battery strap, slap a 1500 3S in there, and we're good to go. And then on to the dumb. It wouldn't be one of my projects if there wasn't dumb in it. So I get it together, and the castle makes its beeps, and I pull the trigger, and I get a bunch of buzzing noises. And I had rechecked those ABC wires a half a dozen times. Not shown on the film here. I checked them, and I checked them again, and I checked them again, and I couldn't get it to work. So then this happened.
2 hours later.
I got it all put back together. I got it hooked up to Castle Link. I finally, it was probably more than 2 hours. I finally get it thrown together, and I mean, it didn't disappoint. That is censored smoothness right there, and that thing has got some torque. It will jump all over the place. So I'm suddenly very excited to see how it's going to do. But can't hit the rocks just yet. I've got to slap some paint on this guy. Finished out the masking. Everything was ready. What's going to fall out of the little magic shaker? Why, it's to me a brilliant blue. Had about, I don't know, maybe half a can left over from painting part of another body. I do love that blue, and I don't have a blue truck, and I really wanted a blue truck. Well, black and blue at any rate. The colors went on nice because the weather was being nice to me. And that brings us to the reveal. Did it all come together? I mean, yeah, it totally did. I think this thing looks phenomenal. The hard accessories are awesome. I threw the stock tires on for photo purposes and decided we'll give it some of the little basic tests, the basic skills I throw at it, just to see how it does on the stock tires. And they're okay. I would put them right alongside Canyon Trails. Look at the sparkle on that body. Look at the sun gleaming off of that thing. It won't stay that clean for long, I can say without giving out a spoiler. Very dry. If I had wetted the ground down, the stock tires might have performed a little better. I don't think a lot better, because we come to the good old, the out and back on the side hill. And remember when I talked about those foams, the foreshadowing about those foams? Yeah. I tried this for, it might have been 4 minutes. Like, you can watch it just like there's something invisible under the truck, literally just rolling it over. It couldn't make it 4 feet out of that about 12-foot turnaround. It would get on there and just fall off over and over. So you know what I said? I said, enough. Went and grabbed those showdowns, which, again, potential spoiler, no tuning might be the forever tire for this truck. They're great. I mean, they're broken in, yeah, and look at that ground clearance. The truck could use a little weight down low. The body isn't particularly heavy, and I think its CG is okay for something with so much ground clearance, because it will just go. It can get to points where you would expect the nose end to lift, and it just doesn't. Which I thought might at least be some small issue in descending. So I decided to bring it back down that same steep-ish line. And luckily, the Castle has got some pretty good hold to it. Because, yeah, it wants to lift, but I don't know. I guess the suspension is compliant enough, because it doesn't. And sections like this, which give other trucks fits, particularly something like the Ecto, the ground clearance here is immense. If I can get some weight to move that CGH down, this thing is going to be, it's going to be tough to stop. So at this point, I figured, let's just go all in. Let's take it out to Sultan's Curse, which is rough and mean. And I always feel like the camera doesn't do a good enough job of showing the scale of it, because the drop-offs, well, you can kind of see there the thickness of those concrete slabs is about the height of the tire. So this thing, with its wheelbase and the very short overhangs and monstrous ground clearance in the middle, I think the manual states 80 millimeters at the middle, it's almost difficult to get it hung up. If you can clear the pumpkin, and the pumpkins are not oversized, they're nice little guys. If you can get those around things that are hanging out, it just goes straight over. Oblivion, one of the newest obstacles, the shared components of Sultan's Curse. This was the stuff that I had the energy to move this far. And this ascent is tough for anybody. It's mean. It's quite steep. And those sheer faces, like I say, 3 to 4 inches thick. This guy had no problem. I've never driven up this on this line, so I made some relatively poor choices, but this guy is a climber. It's a little climber, and that's double block at the top, right over. Which brings us to the conclusion, or the wrap. It's 5.9 pounds, 94.7 ounces. Of that weight, 57.55 ounces is on the front axle. That's a 61-39 weight split with no additions, no tune, no nothing, just how it sits. Look at here compared to an Ecto. Look at the clearance. Look at the height difference. I don't understand. How are more people not driving these? Yeah, to my understanding, it's been out since 2017, so it's not the latest and the greatest. But straight out of the box, and perhaps not directly comparable, the Ecto, say, not being portaled, it outperformed the Ecto out of the box. It definitely outperforms a TRX-4 out of the box, which I guess would be a more fair version to compare. But I don't understand. It literally wowed me. I was blown away by how competently this thing performed once you take those stock tires off. But what vehicle spends its whole life on its stock tires? I can't think of one. So there you have it, the MST CFX-W. It's pretty great. But don't forget, like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.